What's the goss, applesauce? The paint color Applesauce Cake by PPG, or Deluxe if you're here in Canada, is a richly saturated golden tan color that is about to get reviewed by this guy. I've seen people regard it as one of the best warm neutrals to use in your home, or even their favorite warm paint color to use throughout their entire home. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't go that far. But at any rate, I'll tell you all about it, what are some ways to use it, and build a little color palette for you to use in your home. And if you like this video, click that thumbs up and I'll do a cartwheel for you. So we're really starting to see warmer paint colors come back into favor these last few years, but I think a large part of it is the fact that warm paint makes you feel warm, typically. Like, it's kind of a thing. There's something psychological about feeling all nice and cozy with beiges and tans and all those warm paint colors in the paint color world. One of the issues when picking warm paint colors is if you go for the more saturated and vibrant ones like orange, red, or yellow, they could have the opposite effect where they're too hot to handle and can just be visually taxing, especially over long periods of time. Applesauce Cake is an interesting one because it's definitely saturated and has a lot of colorant in it, but I wouldn't necessarily call it overly vibrant either. Before we get into the undertones and all that jazz, let's start with the more fundamental assessment of how dark this color really is. Hopping onto the PPG website, I can find its LRV of 38, and that is the light reflectance value, which tells us the percentage of light that this color reflects back at your old eyeballs, or young eyeballs, forever young. But with an LRV like that makes it a pretty dark color, and I would even say it's on the lowest end of the mid-tone color spectrum. When you start to get darker than Applesauce Cake, which is a delicious sounding name by the way, you start to approach those colors that may deem as accent caliber, which are usually your more darker or bolder paint color choices. It's not necessarily a color you would put just all over your home. Maybe you would reserve it for select areas or even walls or furniture pieces, which are usually your more darker or bolder paint color choices. Which leads me to the question of whether this is a color I would say is the best warm neutral for your whole house. I wouldn't say so, to be honest. I've seen this type of color used throughout a whole house, and it didn't particularly look bad, but I would say that it might have been overwhelming this space a little bit. So let's talk about this color itself, which is basically a yellow gold tan in essence. Tans are loosely connected to neutral colors like brown and beige, but are normally a little more rich in how saturated they are, which Applesauce Cake totally is. It sort of flirts with both sides of being composed of neutral qualities, but still being hit with a dose of honey mustard and what PPG calls an almond undertone. I don't know what that means, but is it the almond skin? Is it inside the almond? Who knows? Almond milk? Anyway, I feel a color of this caliber isn't really a main color that I would throw on an entire house's interior. But if you pick and choose certain spots for it, I think it can really add a fantastic punch of color within an otherwise neutral palette. If you were thinking of using this as an exterior color, you could do that. It's just not necessarily my favorite color to use on the main body of a home. I think in some situations that saturation could be amplified a bit much outside, and it would maybe lean towards something a bit muted and perhaps more grayed out or gray leaning. I like Applesauce Cake in the family room because it's vibrant enough to feel bright during the day when you're getting your prices right on, and warm and cozy enough to snuggle up and watch Wheel of Fortune in the early evening game shows. But this is a color that isn't just limited to the family room. You can make a case for it in any room because as a color, it's not very polarizing. Just think of it as an amplified or an in-your-face neutral, meaning it really suits a neutral palette, but you also don't want to have all your paint colors be in your face all over the place. I really hope it makes sense to you people. I just have a way of explaining things sometimes, so anyway. In essence, it's kind of neutral, but it's also not neutral like an off-white would be, you know? So now that we've discussed some of the more fundamental aspects of this color, we all know that color palettes are made of several colors, which I have conveniently included for you in this video as well. We have 4 colors to talk about, starting with a light color, which really becomes the true neutral of the palette. It doesn't really have an exciting name, but it is the perfect way to start my day. Every morning, basically. It's oatmeal. Compared to Applesauce Cake, oatmeal seems pretty boring. And I like boring because it's easier to predict and utilize. You don't need to think with oatmeal. You just pop it in the microwave, maybe add a half a teaspoon of peanut butter if you're feeling fancy, and you'll be good every time. The color oatmeal is a pale off-white with a 76 LRV, so quite a bit lighter here. And it's also way more passive feeling because pretty much it's a very light grayish, which is a combination of gray and beige. This color has maybe a hint of a yellowy beige, which is toned down with gray. I would say it's so passive that you can use it as an off-white trim color in conjunction with applesauce cake, or have it as a standalone wall color to become the primary color within the palette. Honestly, if I were doing a consultation for someone that were using these two colors, I would probably start with oatmeal everywhere and then pick and choose where I wanted to use applesauce cake in those areas of intrigue, or the places that I wanted to stand out a bit more. Like maybe a dining room, powder room, I guess family room could work as well. I really want to stretch this oatmeal cake kind of analogy, but I'm just making myself hungry, so maybe I won't. We're bringing in a completely different color hue for our mid-tone color pairing, and this is a color that gently plays off of oatmeal, but really complements our color of the video in applesauce cake. Yellow and purple are pretty polarizing color hues, which can be jarring to some, but really engaging to others. So I went with a powdery purple called silverberry as the midtone. As you can see, very different from the other two colors, but that's on purpose, obviously. Everything I do is purposeful. Imagine if I just had a wall of color swatches and I would just play darts, and then that's how I put all the colors together. Is that an idea for a video? Now this color is not something I would flaunt in the main areas of the home necessarily. I'm not saying it couldn't work in a hallway because any color could work under the right circumstances. I just strongly believe that for a lot of people, the main arteries of your home, like your foyer, hallways, entryway, those are usually better off being a little more neutral so that the rooms they connect with all make sense as a composition. If silverberry was your main color going throughout your home, it may look fine with your corresponding living room color, but sort of clash with your dining room color. Which again, brings me back to my buddy oatmeal, okay? It pretty much goes with everything. So oatmeal hallways, great. Silverberry bedroom, also great. This is also a great color to consider as the 10% or the accent color within an applesauce cake painted room, because the gold in the paint color will really pop off of the icy purple found in silverberry. So see if you can find a throw or pillows that really match this color for a very sleek contemporary hit of color. The third color pairing is a darker one with an LRV of 18, and it's called clamshell, which is sort of this taupe khaki brown that feels toned up with deep gray instead of black. It has that slightly dusty quality I like to describe colors as having when they're not overly dark and pure. They have that slight smokiness which keeps them feeling soft and gentler for a dark color. This color interacts with the three others really nicely, and that's because of that added gray to mute it a little bit, where it only becomes an accent because of its depth or darkness rather than a deep saturated vibrancy that some other more dynamic warm chocolatey browns can have. A little side note to anyone looking for exterior inspiration, I think clamshell as a main body exterior color combined with oatmeal as a corresponding trim color, really solid match. The interior trim color or white paint color in this palette is delicate white, which is pretty much as pure and pretty as you can get within PPG's entire collection. It's not going to have any visually apparent undertones that could skew the other colors. It's just straight up white. Here's a video that I think you'll really love that we did recently, so why not keep this paint people train going, huh?